So if I know that there are two things, then I can put them in two categories, and I can ask myself the question, why is this being allowed and why is that being allowed? The consensus, maybe consensus is too strong, but the belief amongst many who have been on the story of the migration for years now is that this is a ploy to create voters, Democratic voters. And I don't think that's impossible. I think that's probably playing a role. I don't know how realistic it is. I don't know whether or not it is clear that migrants necessarily carry the likelihood of voting blue that the blue team imagines. But anyway, I think that that's a plausible explanation in part, but I don't think it really covers it. There are other hypotheses that are darker. There is talk about the possibility of trading citizenship for military service. I think that's a very frightening prospect, but I didn't invent the idea. It has been discussed, and the problem is that to the extent that we saw things like the vaccine mandate drive out the skeptics from the military, this process would also bring in a lot of people into military service who would have more reason to follow immoral orders than a citizen soldier who had been American their whole life. In other words, if the power structure is granting you citizenship, which you want, in exchange for your obedience, then what is it that would cause you to say no? So if you wanted a force that was capable of acting on behalf of tyranny against Americans, then a force that doesn't have a deep history with the rights of being an American, that doesn't have a long-standing allegiance to people within the country, that force would be potentially more compliant, and that worries me.
That should worry you. I really didn't consider that until you just said that. But my thought about this idea of the military turning on the citizens was always, but the military is citizens. And many of them are deeply patriotic and unlikely to do something like that. But if they did swap out immigrants and they did do that, holy shit.
This is exactly...
Then you have a real coup.
This is what spooks me, is that in thinking about the various scenarios 5 years ago, even 3 years ago, I would have said, I fear that somebody is going to issue immoral orders to the military, but I'm convinced that the military will divide over them, that there are those who will carry out immoral orders and there are others who won't.
And at the same time, there's a senator, I think, from Massachusetts that introduced a bill to ban what they call paramilitary training, which is just training with firearms, like to get better at them.
Right.
So the idea is you have a right to keep and bear arms, but you can't be good at them because you can't practice.
So if you imagine in my naive state a few years ago, the idea was, well, you have a very well-armed populace. You have a military that's likely to be divided about immoral orders. I don't like the sound of that, but I don't think that it's a slam dunk that the tyrants win, because the part of the military that's not going to follow immoral orders and the citizenry that will fight to defend the republic, that's a pretty powerful force. But then you have vaccine mandates, which force out most of the people who are independent-minded from the military. And then you have the idea that migrants might be granted citizenship in exchange for military service. And
has that been introduced anywhere, or is this just a complete hypothesis?
No, it's not a hypothesis. Actually, maybe, Jamie, you could look it up. I don't want to slander anybody, but yes, I believe it has been raised by at least one senator.
Jesus Christ.
Is that the paramilitary thing?
No. The other thing, the thing about granting citizenship to illegal immigrants in exchange for military service.
So, in any case, I did not. It took a lot of thinking about different pieces of the puzzle to begin to wonder about something like this. But having wondered about it, it doesn't disappear from my mind as, oh, that's just simply crazy. Actually, this, given the number of things that don't add up, this begins to explain them in a reasonably parsimonious way, and it has me worried. But that is not inherently, in fact, it is probably not the same thing as what would explain the concentration of Chinese migrants.
Right.
Right? The Chinese migrants presumably have left China with the knowledge of their government. The bias of that group in favor of males is something we can talk about if you want to, but it has an obvious interpretation. And that ought to frighten us as well, right? So at the same...
How many are we talking about? Is there an estimate of how many military-aged Chinese men have gotten into the country?
Now, I'm always hesitant at this point in the conversation because what I saw is what one person looks at through their eyes. So I'm in no position to estimate that. But I believe we are talking about tens of thousands. Certainly, when we're talking about the entire migration, we are talking about millions. And the number that is flowing through Central America, the flow-through rate in a given day is many thousands. So it's hard to know, and I would want somebody who was in a position to look at an estimate, not just a spot check.
So if the tyrannical government is playing some long game of chess, these are the pieces they would be
Closest I
moving.
could find on a number.
Chinese immigrants who entered the U.S. without authorization. 2023, it's over 30,000. Look at how low it was in 2021
Yep.
and how high it is in 2023.
What's the source on this?
This is the U.S. Customs and Border Protection.
Oh, my God. And that's probably a low estimate. It's probably like VAERS.
When I was looking up the other thing about the military, I think you have to have a green card first.
Oh,
you
and they
can
give them a
join.
green card. But
This also was talking about the numbers are down for the Air Force, the Army.
yeah, for everybody. They're actually asking people who retired to come back.